give you. The Derek Zoolander Center for Kids Who Can't Read Good.
What is this?
A center for ants.
Do you ever write a text or an email and you feel like you're being judged for your spelling and grammar? It might be something you're noticing more about other people in this age of Facebook and social media. The Sydney Morning Herald has a story today on the falling standards of our school kids in reading and writing, at least in their NAPLAN results. So do you feel like increasingly we're a nation of kids who can't read good? And is the next generation reading less good? David Roy is a lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle with me now. Hello, David.
Hello, Paul.
I noticed you writing on social media with excellent grammar and punctuation. You were talking about the NAPLAN results. You because being the father of a child with disabilities, you are particularly interested in NAPLAN through that perspective.
Well, it's an area of research that I undertake. So, I think NAPLAN is interesting for how it works with disabilities, with homeschooling, and I think the online process of NAPLAN is interesting. And I think some of the commentary is what we hear every year. It's the same people bringing out the same tropes. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, it's great. Oh, there's no problem. And I think we need to kind of move beyond that and look at positives.
This year there's been a different problem in that we've now found belatedly that we can't compare the online results to the written results. For perhaps a reason that you've got insight into, because as you said on Twitter, I guess I was reading.
At DMS Roy.
That's right. The online NAPLAN is actually testing kids on their writing abilities rather than their handwriting abilities.
It is doing that, yes. When you give a written test to any child, you're actually testing them twice. You're testing them on their knowledge, but you're also testing them on their ability to handwrite. And that is a particular skill that for some children is a challenge. Anyone who's looked at anything that I've handwritten will have seen the challenge that I have, not in forming letters, in like a sentence structure, but just in the legibility. I went through my whole school career having a challenge because of dyspraxia within the neatness of my handwriting. I can read anyone's handwriting because of it, but I would be tested in my handwriting as well as in my intellectual content, my comprehension, and these are all very separate things, and in many tests it gets compounded together, and the research does tell us that different types of testing allow different types of kids to demonstrate their ability. Of course, I'm just giving an informed opinion here in this area.
Well, you as you say, you've been actually researching. Yeah. You have personal experience, both from yourself personally and because you have a child who is in this kind of situation.
And with this year's The NAPLAN, I think we'll use the definite article given the content of a previous conversation you were having. It's also been different because the online test is a very different test, not only in the way that the kids sit it, but in actually how it then works. It's called an adaptive test, which means when a child answers a question or gives a response, depending on the response, the algorithm goes, that was too easy for that child, we'll actually stretch them and lift them beyond.
Yes.
Unlike a written test where you can't change it. So they're not comparable again in those ways. And to be honest, I think that's a great thing, not being comparable.
Which is pretty crazy. I was just going to call Tim into the studio for a second there, and he's just run out of the control room. So we'll get him back, because Tim Connell, who works with us, is a print journalist, formerly from the Newcastle Herald, who... NAPLAN, pros, cons, whatever, looks at social media and goes, people don't know how to write. People don't know how to read and write. But that, just before you answer that question, bringing Tim into the scenario. Sorry, I dragged you in without notice here, Tim. But this is something as a print journalist. When you watch people writing on social media, tell me your impressions.
Oh yeah, I mean it's not everyone else's job, so you can't be too harsh. But, I mean, you don't just see kids. You see people who are baby boomers on Facebook going on rants, just mangling whatever they're trying to say. And that applies to things that they're trying to say nicely as well. And you sort of wonder when we got so bad. It's not a recent thing, I think, for Australians. I just don't think we've ever been that good.
When we became so bad. Sorry. But I think that's the point, is that conversational language is imperfect. It is not grammatically formal. And again, there's different ways you can approach grammar, about being progressive in grammar or being restrictive within it. But Twitter and Facebook are conversations. They're cafes. So should we be expected to be writing in a formal way?
Well, I suppose
I like to, but that's because...
The test would be, can you express yourself?
Yes.
If you can actually express yourself, then that's probably adequate, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I don't expect people to be speaking the Queen's English on social media, but there are people saying then instead of than and not really realising they're making a mistake, saying should have. I just don't think people know they're writing wrong things.
Which kind of comes back to you as an educator and a lecturer of educators. Mm-hmm. Are we not learning these things in school? And
I think we've always been like this, so in note form and everywhere. It's being able to write suitably for the right context. That if you're writing a letter, let's just say to an incompetent politician, that really covers them all, then you might want to write in a more formal way. The way that we're talking, because it's going out broadcast, we're being politer, but there's still an informality to it, which might be very different to the way that I would speak to, say, an officer of the law, she or he stopping me to check for check breathalyzing. I would be, again, a different form of language.
That's fair enough, as long as when it comes to the point where you need to speak or write in the formal language, let's say you are prompted to write a letter to an incompetent member of Parliament, you need to be able to do it, and you need to be able to express yourself in kind of longer sentences, more complex thoughts.
Which is why tests are a key element within the education system. And NAPLAN has got a role to play. And that's what it is important. How we then use NAPLAN, I think, is the bigger issue. It's not NAPLAN itself. And that, coming back to the topic, I'm trying to keep us in there as well, that we actually assess where kids are in different stages for the teachers and the parents to use. And the fact that we couldn't compare the online and the written form of NAPLAN is probably a really good thing, because that's when we started to screw up the system, when it became comparable. So it became almost like a selling point for school in our monetarised education system in Australia. That's the whole issue. So I don't have an issue with them not being comparable, because the whole PISA and international rankings, it does not benefit kids.
The point that we started this conversation at is that our NAPLAN results appear to be going backwards in some areas. Some, I think the ACT inched forward just a little, but New South Wales did not.
That was still at like 94% from things, 95%, going down to 80% in reading. And again, when you look at what tests do, they actually measure what is being taught. So there's an issue there, that are we teaching to the test and therefore we're not meeting the test, or are people starting to realise we don't like NAPLAN because it's how it's being used, so then teachers are actually focusing on other things? Or is it more symptomatic, and I think this is a bigger thing, that our whole education system, instead of being tinkered with internally, needs to be taken apart and rethought again? In fact, Professor Brian Cox has been making that very point in the UK about tests and the way that we're teaching, where we're constricting the curriculum, constricting the knowledge, and therefore kids are being siloed and they think of writing and reading in certain areas, when every educational topic that you do involves reading and writing. So therefore literacy and numeracy are every teacher and every parent's responsibility, not just the English department's responsibility. And one other thing to add in, I think the diminution of language teaching within Australia, which is across the board, has having a massive impact.
You mean foreign language teaching?
Yes. Yeah. You look at countries who do well in these kind of international standings, and people say, well, it's their teaching system. Well, actually look at how many of those insist that students have two languages, one language other than their own. They're the ones that do well. So there might be a correlation going on there, because when I learnt languages at school, and I had to learn Latin as well as French and Wales a bit of German, it taught me how grammar, how writing, how reading works. And I've been able to apply that across my whole life.
David Roy is with us. He's a lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle. Tim, you were trying to escape earlier. I'll let you escape. Thank you very much. I called him in unbeknownst to him. Barney from Whitebridge says he thinks we've always been like this. We're only noticing because we are typing on text and social media.
Yeah, I mean, we're communicating more. We're writing more than we ever did because of computers, because of social media, and it's causing us some problems. But people again say, well, we're not doing well in the test because kids are on computers too much. We said the same thing when movies came out. We said it with comics. We said it with television. I'm sure they said it about radio, that it would diminuate the ability to read and to write. There is no actual research out there to say that kids on computers and iPads is doing that.
Martin from Cardiff has used the F word, Finland, where they do not use testing in their schools, yet they are near the top of the world's educational standards.
They don't use standardised testing across nationally, but all teachers use tests continually. A great teacher will be continually assessing their kids, as will parents. That's what the purpose of it is for. This kind of national idea and comparing is where it goes down. But teachers use tests all the time, informally, informal summative and formative tests. Summative where it summarises what they've learnt, formative as they're progressing and forming the knowledge throughout.
Okay.
It's a useful tool.
You optimistic about literacy?
Yeah, of course, because language, I believe, is something that progresses and changes over time. I do not use words that Shakespeare used or invented, and language is changing for my children. I'm continually learning new language from them. I've learnt new languages since I became an Australian, and the whole words have completely changed for me. That mean, like the word sook or the word dunny. These are completely new language words for me that I used in a very different context. So it's a flowing thing. Yes, we have to teach grammar. Yes, we have to teach formal ways of writing. But I don't think we should get too up in the air about it. And I don't think we should worry about the reading. Kids are reading all the time. It's making them active knowledge gatherers, being aware of the variety of semiotics out there, visual and physical, and being media literate as well as being literate for good texts.
David, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Paul.
Dr. David Roy, lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle. In just a moment, did you watch Q&A last night with all the Queensland politicians? David's going, yes, I did. For some people, it was not. They were unused to Queensland politicians until they saw them all arrayed. Come on, David. Come on. You want to say you're reaching?
I think that's an example of the way that people use language and how maybe it's not as strong in some areas and some people as it could be in others. Their informality, their aggression, and but it shows that education is needed.
Thank you very much, David Roy. Let's move on.